Bonjour mes amis, c'est la heure de la vision d'API.net, or c'est la heure de .NET API review. Whoopee! I think whoopee is French for hooray. Whatever. All right. Hey, the whole backlog fits on a screen. I didn't even like zoom out or anything. So that actually surprises me because I feel like we're getting to the time of the year when people start opening issues and marking them blocking because they're like, oh god, I only have 2 weeks to get it in before API freeze. But whatever. Whatever. You actually have 4 weeks for that. Yeah, whatever. All right. First up, add the derived types property to the is closed type attribute .NET runtime 1290009er.
We can't see the screen share.
Oh, you act like internal people need to also see my screen. All right. Still 1290009.
Okay, I guess I will introduce this. Um, so the next version of C Sharp is doing a closed class feature, which restricts inheriting from the class to the same assembly. Sort of in the C Sharp language, you're only allowed to inherit from a closed class from within the assembly that's declaring the closed class, or more precisely, the module that's declaring the closed class. This is an adjustment to the metadata format for those classes. This adds a property which lists the definition of classes which inherit from the closed class, and specifically like direct inheritance. So for example, we've got a sample here that shows closed class animal. We've got two types that inherit directly from it and one which inherits sort of indirectly. And we would add this metadata using this property, listing the direct derived types. So this is sort of the point of this API is to allow components at runtime to discover the language level view of the hierarchy here. Closed classes, thought to be a feature where the fact that the set is closed to the language level is useful to do things like switch expression exhaustiveness, yada yada yada. And that would include things like, for system text JSON to let you put an attribute on a closed class that just says figure out what the derived types are and cook up the discriminators for them and that kind of thing. That's sort of one of the main scenarios that we have in mind for adding this information. Um, yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to know in terms of background?
No, but if it's a thing so this attribute previously discussed is only supposed to be used by the compiler, or anybody handwriting IL. And if you're always going to set the derived types value, why don't we just make it a constructor parameter?
Yeah, so it may be quite reasonable to make it a constructor parameter instead. One thing I anticipate happening in the future is we might do closed enum, and we might add attribute targets.enum to the type, to the attribute usage on the type, and then put like an empty list of derived types on that in all cases. Maybe that would be fine as well. So it feels reasonable to me to take away the setter here and put a constructor parameter instead. I'm curious if that means that we would like take away the parameterless constructor, or if we would just add a new constructor that has the parameter. Right, because if we still have a parameterless constructor, then it's sort of like you still kind of don't need to provide an array, so to speak, if you were making this attribute.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were to make it a constructor parameter, we would get rid of the default parameter constructor, probably not in the same milestone, so that we could have some, syncing up. But what would a
Okay,
closed enum be?
so The nature of that would be that it would be harder to force just some random integer value that was not declared in the enums member list to coerce it into the enum type. The point is that when you would say closed enum, that means that something in the language is helping you make sure that unrelated values do not get converted to the enum type. That's what that's the kind of thing we would be trying to do with that feature.
Fair enough. With that one, assuming someone instantiates this, would you expect the closed enums to be if we just leave it as an optional, so a settable property, would you expect it to be null to indicate the question makes no sense, or empty to indicate there are no derived types? Or the question is, should we have a question mark on the array?
To me, it kind of feels simpler to just say, like, for enums, let's just use an empty array. Like, yeah, it doesn't have derived types. I mean, you're not allowed to inherit enums anyway, but it's not wrong to say that the list of derived types is empty. So, and normalizing null to be similar to empty is also reasonable. I just think the compiler would pick one and stick to it. And just picking empty array sort of for ease of usage feels like the most reasonable thing to me. And thus, a single constructor, you always pass this argument, and if the type doesn't allow, deriving, inheriting, then you just put empty.
It's fair. Just means that the implementation, we have to make the derived types property initialized to the empty array, so that if you instantiate it, you get the value if somebody doesn't assign it. All right. As I'm sure you're familiar with because of the meetings I know you've been in, Chad is confused why Calico Cat's not in the list. I've tried to answer that question.
Sure. I mean, this has come up elsewhere. And this is basically, I mean, the way the language feature works is that it places a restriction on the direct descendants. If you wanted to also place a restriction on the indirect descendants, you would put closed on the classes that you want that restriction to exist on. So, like in another meeting, I think the way we try to describe this was that the inheritors of a closed class are sort of like a list of roots. And I mean, the user's in control of whether further deriving is possible or not. And that basically felt to us like a reasonable point of control. If you want to have that kind of restriction that recursively, someone outside your assembly is not going to inherit this, then you should put either closed or sealed on the derived types that you declare. And Tanner, I think Tanner had a good way of explaining this the other day. If you wanted to sort of offer any perspective on that, feel free.
Yeah, I think I described it as you have the transitive set of derived types isn't really important for exhaustiveness. What's important is the closed type itself, so in this case animal, which is the root of everything. And then you have the exhaustiveness roots, which are the things that you have to check to determine exhaustiveness. So dog and cat, because they directly derive from animal, those are the exhaustiveness roots. Those are the only things that you have to check to determine exhaustiveness of something that is typed animal. Calico cat is covered by cat because it derives from it. And so, regardless of anyone else extending Calico cat, you have still checked for exhaustiveness just by checking for cat there. So you only have to care about those direct dependencies and not the whole transitive set.
But the compiler would still let you add a clause for Calico Cat if you wanted to, but it's just optional.
Right, and you have to ensure that it's ordered before any check for cat in that case. And if you only had Calico Cat and not cat, it would warn that you're not exhaustive.
Yeah, so I mean here Calico Cat is matched. And it's possible, like you're encouraged to have nested closed class kind of hierarchies, to put it at different levels of the hierarchy, in which case you can break things down in a fine-grained way. For example, if you place the closed modifier on cat, then if you only had case dog, the compiler would suggest to you, hey, go match Calico Cat, right? It's kind of, the compiler's oriented around helping you match the exhaustiveness roots of the closed types that are flowing in effectively.
So if one of the exhaustive arms is itself a closed class, then you promote its dependence to the missing cases recommendation.
Exactly. I mean, it's like an expansion process. Internally, like we see a value of animal coming in, and we have a type set that just replaces the animal with the set of exhaustiveness roots sort of transitively, effectively.
Yep. But for the property under discussion, even if cat were closed and Calico Cat were declared in the same assembly, which I guess it would have to be, the property is just going to say dog and cat, right?
That's also true. So that means that components which are interested in the transitive hierarchy are going to have to inspect the types that are listed in the attribute and say, is this itself closed, and go learn information about that.
All right, I think we've exhausted this one, unless anybody has any other feedback. Going once, twice, sold.
Okay, and this means the constructor will initialize it so that if the property is never set, there will be an empty array in there.
Yeah, or that the getter returns field question mark, or right out empty.
Good, makes sense.
I guess you can be lazy and be bracket, but that's a. I think we would say that violated our style because it was an untyped expression. But whatever. All right, thank you, Ricky.
Okay. Thank you.
And the highly related proposal adds system text JSON support for closed hierarchies.
Yeah, so I can speak to that one. So this is basically about adding support for closed hierarchies in FTJ. Now, typically, we wouldn't need to do anything. These are, class hierarchies, and these would be supported out of the box using the existing polymorphism feature, but we wanted to do something a bit more out of the boxy, as it were. One common complaint that we have received from many users is that the feature today, as it applies to typical class hierarchies, is that you need to explicitly declare every single type in the hierarchy plus the discriminator, and that admittedly does create a lot of boilerplate for users, even though it is creating an explicit contract. So the idea here is that given that we have uh, a contract provided by the language, that we have a fixed and finite set of derived types that we can reason about at compile time, it kind of made sense for us to try to insert a feature that basically just infers all of the derived types, but in this case, it would be inferring specifically the immediate descendants, exactly in the sense of the previous property that we were discussing. There exist two potential alternatives. The first one is this proposal. So basically, we would be adding another property to the existing JSON polymorphic attribute. It would be a Boolean defaulting to false, which, if set to true, would basically let the serializer to automatically populate all the derived types for the annotated type using that list plus name of each individual derived type as the default discriminator. That is one approach. So you still need to individually opt in individual closed classes. The second approach is that we make a decision to automatically treat closed hierarchies as polymorphic. So this means there wouldn't be a flag as the one being proposed here, or there might be one, but it would default to true on condition that the specific annotated type is closed. In which case, if you annotate a closed hierarchy, if you try to serialize a closed hierarchy, we document a convention in which SDJ would automatically treat that as polymorphic. I'm increasingly thinking that this makes sense. I was initially a bit more skeptical, but if you think about how closed hierarchies work, they are an implement that basically lets you interface with the type using pattern matching based dispatch rather than dispatch based on virtual dispatch. So I think that there is a strong possibility that we might want to consider this because it actually provides a very easy way for users to define discriminated unions that can be round-tripped with zero configuration. So this is kind of the bones of the alternate proposal in this issue. So I was hoping we might collectively make a decision on what the default should be. Hence, we're all here right now.
We'll die on the hill. We will not ever allow automatic derived type detection. Someone must make an opt-in gesture. That is my permanent position as a member of the security team. I could certainly be outvoted by other members of the security team, but no.
Even if the list of derived types is finite, known statically, and is easy to reason about.
Yes.
And just keep in mind that in languages like Rust, in Haskell, in Scala, in I believe Swift, but
if I had my way, we would not have a JSON serializer. Every feature that it has is a feature against my better judgment. But
so you bring us back to like .NET 4.5 or whatever. There was a JSON serializer back then. Just everyone used.
I manually serialize and deserialize everything that I ever do because I want upgradability to work. I want debuggability to work, and serializers don't do that.
Well, I'm glad that system text JSON exists. I
like the reader. I just don't like the serializer. But I don't. The problem is, from a security perspective, that the assumption that it should just works if there's only a single developer. But someone can have already had structure, can already have had code, and then they're like, oh, I just want to use this switch expression thing. I'm going to go slap closed on this type. Now you've changed what they're doing in serialization. That is not a good upgrade scenario. There must be a gesture. Like greenfield code, single developer, I get you. Enterprise code that's upgrading from a previous version, security nightmare.
So is inferred derived types, like, are we going to default that to true for closed? Is that the idea? Or are you saying that you want to explicitly be forced to list out all the types?
So there are two variants of this proposal. The first one is the so-called prudent one, where infer derived types is an option that you have to enable per type. But if you scroll further down in this issue, you'll see that there's an alternate proposal that says, actually, we needn't approve anything. We just make this the convention for closed hierarchies.
I think the general problem with closed hierarchies is that it's not guaranteed to be static. Even in the case where you don't have someone else going and adding things in, a library can still willingly, and likely will in many scenarios, introduce a breaking change to add a type to the closed set, under the expectation that users should hit the fallback path that throws in their existing switches. That is then an indicator that they should upgrade explicitly and add handling for it. So we can't assume that the set is trivial and known even with closed.
Right, but that's technically a source breaking change. If a library did do that, then they would source break their consumers.
Right.
Right,
Sure.
and so you'd have to have JSON also be robust against that, however.
Right, JSON serializer, to be more specific, deals in automagic contract derivation. Like, that's frankly the thing that it does. Not a huge fan of that myself either, but yeah, it's what happens when you add a property on a type. You could inadvertently, divulge data that you shouldn't be divulging. It's just an extension of that attribute of the serializer.
Jeremy, I'm surprised that you went on about the security issues and then said you like the reader but not the writer, because like you could already serialize.
I like
object,
the reader,
right?
And the writer, but not the serializer.
I see. So you like the reader and the writer. It's not about deserialize versus serialize. It's about the
the black
API.
magic.
Yeah.
Let's keep adding a feature because someone wants to change the casing, or someone wants to include all properties except properties I put ignore on. But no, let's not include any properties except the ones that I say yes to, and then let's make those two features fight, and like let's add polymorphic
With great power
deserialization.
comes great responsibility. It's a lot easier to use the serialized deserialization.
And I will even say,
but yeah,
given the fact that you can make the computer write your code for you, writing simple serialization logic is easy. We don't need serializers anymore.
I feel like that makes it worse, right? Because then like everyone just like rolls their own security bugs. Like that's one of the benefits of libraries, I think, in a post AI world, is that we're using AI obviously to help us write these, especially at this point. But you also have like a bunch of professionals reviewing it and so forth. So yeah, you said that we would need people on the security team to overrule you. Like, do we even have the people here to approve this API?
I mean, aside from the fact that I have the stream, like, I don't have a veto power. But I'm just saying that from the perspective of my opinion as a member of .NET Security, I will just keep thumping the table and say no to option 2. Probably, or 3. That didn't actually be 3. In my opinion, everything that is part of serialization must be user consent. And I'm pretty sure Levi and Barry agree.
Can it be blanket user
I'm pretty
consent?
sure
Can
that
we just say, sorry,
no, go ahead.
could we offer an option to say, yeah, I want automatic?
I mean, that
user consent.
That is like slapping this one word, which we'll then debate what this one word is. That's enough of a gesture. Like, someone took responsibility. They wrote down, I am aware that that the use of the word closed somewhere else, which was only intended by the language team for switch case exhaustiveness, I have opted in to, for this type and its immediate derived types, to say, yes, if I add a new closed type, extend the system. Or add a new type to the closure, extend the system. That is
And
a
to be
gesture.
clear, this would only apply to closed types as well, right? Is that like with this proposal, if you set it to true? Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So
I
that's
actually
the
would
thing,
prefer
right?
it
So,
didn't.
right, exactly, right. So, so the thing is, JSON polymorphic attribute is an existing attribute, and it is applied to regular class hierarchies. So, assuming we approve this API, one side effect of that is that we need to honor that property if it has been turned on for non-closed hierarchies. And of course, we would probably tone this down to imply immediate descendants within the current assembly, which is what the closed class semantics imply for non-closed hierarchies as well. But it does mean that for the case of non-closed hierarchies, we still need to do assembly.getTypes and find these direct descendants. So that does create a wart in the whole design, just by virtue of making this something that is configurable for anything polymorphic.
And to be clear, with closed types, you can have nested children, right? They just have to be in the same assembly. Like you can have grandchild children.
Oh no. So you could, for example, have a direct descendant of a closed class which is not marked sealed, and therefore you can always derive from that in a second assembly, but it does not matter from an exhaustiveness perspective.
You can't like layer closed or anything like that. There's nothing to. Okay.
You can do that.
Oh, okay.
But if you don't, then you can still, it does not mean that the number of implementations is finite. It just means that I give you a set that you can use to exhaustively pattern match against.
I'll say direct descendants, if that means only one generation or one child deep, that seems arbitrary to me. Like I would say just descendants in the same assembly.
I mean, we'd still want this to reflect the semantics of the compiler for closed hierarchies. So yeah, it would be arbitrary in other contexts, but I
right, but with
think
closed hierarchies, you can put closed on the child, and with this you can't. But I guess you can always just make it a closed hierarchy.
I mean, if you're wanting to tie this feature in with closed, then I think so. Again, my opinion is all polymorphism must be opt-in, and I'm fine. I'm personally fine with the notion of saying, fine, we'll add a thing here that lets you say this base type is a closed type, and go ahead and add the polymorphic discriminators for all of the children that are declared in this assembly following the rules of closed type. There is the question, as came up with Ricky, of what if one of the types in the type closure is also a closed type? Do you then now actually include the grandchildren types because those are the only ones that can be instantiated?
I think you should.
So quick answer, no, because yeah.
And
that's why is the I feel like that's not obvious at all.
Right. So yeah, I should qualify that by saying that that's the current semantics of STJ for polymorphism. So if you have a derived type that is itself defining its own derived types, that information on the derived type is not being consulted by the base class because there could be inconsistency, or you could have multiple inheritance in the case of interfaces. So basically, fancy way of putting it is that the configuration is invariant. You don't inherit derived type information either from your ancestors nor your descendants. It's what gets defined at the current level. So correspondingly, that transferring that principle to closed hierarchies would mean that if a derived type is marked closed, then that would have no impact on the contract for the base closed type.
Well, except for that we're like automatically inferring derived types, which is just entirely different. Because like before, you could put JSON derived type grandchild type, could you not? Like as an explicit attribute.
Yeah,
and now you just have like no option other than listing it out explicitly. Like the inference just doesn't work past one level. I mean, honestly, taking off the security hat just as like a usability hat, I feel like I don't want to approve it that way because it's just like not full featured enough.
Sports hat.
What you say makes sense. I had not considered that. Like you're right. Like this is an inference algorithm that is being used to populate your descendants. So we might be able to do that. But it would, of course, constrain itself to those descendants that are specified in the current assembly, and not any potential close descendants that are defined in other assemblies. But I guess that also transfers to the language semantics, so that's probably fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I have like multiple levels of closed, I just want the whole hierarchy in there. If I'm trying to infer it, I don't want to be forced to, in that situation, then go back to the explicit model just because I had some like intermediate closed types.
Yeah. And matching, so if this Boolean is only about closed types, then matching the closed type semantics of the exhaustiveness recommendations of the compiler, because the compiler will say you are exhausted if you do cat, but if you have missed the cat arc, then it will tell you about Calico and Persian. And so matching that makes sense if we rename this to say that it's only about closed types.
Okay, so I think I have a counter proposal based on your feedback. I would suggest, and especially given the difficulties of supporting this in the context of non-closed hierarchies, I would propose that we instead make this a switch scoped to JSON serializer options or scoped to the corresponding attribute that's being used by the source generator, so that this applies a policy for closed hierarchies only within the scope of that specific JSON serializer options. So in other words, it would be a Boolean called inferred closed type, derived types. I don't know, I'm improvising, which just opts you in to treat closed classes as discriminated unions in serialization. And you don't need to do that on an individual type basis. You just get that as a policy. With a potential of also including a feature switch that lets you turn it on globally for your application. Although
I was with you right up until
that
that last part.
Problems. Yeah, no, I take that back actually.
Yeah, because then you'd need to know the difference between people who had not set it to true and people who'd set it to false.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no. So I think we do not add this flag at all on JSON polymorphic attribute so that we completely disqualify non-closed classes, and we make this a blanket policy. And what might be missing from that approach is an opt-out for individual types. So for individual closed types. I'm not sure if that would be a huge issue, but I'm just putting it out.
We could add that later in theory. If people really hate it, like they can not opt in to begin with and use the polymorphic attributes they do today.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the serializer's problem of the yes everything, oh, except merging with the no nothing except rules. But I'll say as long as it's not default true on the serializer options or the generator, again, taking into account the notion of upgrading the library or just upgrading your runtime. As long as somebody has to write the word, that passes my security sniff test. That's my min bar, is somebody has to write this word.
Okay.
So we can
Any
doodle this
proposals
in
for
here.
a good name?
So
I think infer closed types is fine.
well,
Mm.
infer closed types makes sense when it's on JSON polymorphic because it's talking about polymorphism.
But also, are you talking about if you're talking about closed
Yes.
types?
I just wonder if it needs a polymorphism in there somewhere.
Eh.
Make closed types polymorphic. I hate it, but something along these lines. That works.
That's a long and wordy name, but I wanted something written down. Because I just feel like serializer options infer closed types. It's like, what am I inferring?
That's
Yeah. I wanted to make it short, but it's true. Sounds kind of awkward.
Let's see if chat's written in any good answers.
Yeah, infer closed derived types does sound better, but reading Ricky's comment, but if they're considering adding a get closed derived types that only goes one deep, I do wonder if that ends up being confusing.
I mean, there's also let's see here.
Gross.
With enum JCTP of manual, direct, and recursive.
I would
Yeah.
rather get rid of the enum. Like, I feel like recursive is fine.
I mean,
if you just
the
follow-
enum allows for generational
know.
revisions.
Yeah.
I had thought it, but decided not to say it. But I doodled it here in case it helps with the name.
I think we'd rather pick one convention and make that the universal convention. I know that might be a bit too ambitious, but if people feel that we should make it recursive, it's perfectly feasible. We should just do that and get it over with. Giving users too many options feels like we might be overcomplicating the API surface, at least to me.
I think honestly the first one, but replace automatic with infer.
You don't
It's
say.
pretty close
Yeah.
to what. Is this our first infer one? I suppose so.
Yes. We have include and indent are the only INs.
We don't have any automatic. No.
Nope. So no matter what, we're in trailblazing territory.
I think infer closed type polymorphism is fine. I think that's probably my favorite so far.
Any of the quiet people want to have an opinion? Adam, Pranav, Tanner?
So I was just thinking about like source generators and if we try to access this and like, or I guess accessibility in general, like I could maybe see like the first level being public and then derived types being like private, like if you have multiple closed levels. Just wondering if setting a policy at the options level.
Oh, and what is your plan for internal arcs?
Oh,
Eric? Or-
we're still working on
or
that.
Ira?
I'm oof
Whichever way you want me to do
this
that,
week,
Bell.
so
Internal arcs.
yeah, but
What's that?
yeah,
Public
We-
closed
we-
class animal, public class cat extends animal, public class dog extends animal, internal class hamster extends animal. Does hamster automatically derive?
yeah.
Or
So
automatically
so
Does
that's
Jason-
currently
Do we currently do anything based on whether the type itself is public or internal in system text JSON?
not in SDJ, not in SDJ. As long as it is accessible to the call site, then you can serialize it. The serialization call site.
Mhm. Does that include like private members? That doesn't, right? It's only
No. So
Yeah.
individual private members, so AKA properties or fields, they would need to be opted in explicitly.
but this is a type level question, so it's different. And to this point,
Yeah.
we,
This
yeah.
is a
yeah.
this is a polymorphism question. Because if you
So-
say serialize of T where T is an internal type, it'll serialize it because you said to serialize that internal type.
Hmm.
It's
Like if you included it as a JSON derived type, it will just work, right? Yeah.
I think so, but you
Yeah,
said you wanted it. The question is with closed, did you think internal meant hidden from the
Right.
serializer?
No, I get you.
I think Ricky said they were discussing not allowing closed types to be
Yeah. So currently
heterogeneous.
this is allowed. Yeah, so currently this is allowed, and me and Ricky are working toward a motion in LDM to basically enforce the same accessibility on the immediate descendants as the accessibility of the base closed type, following the argument that they do form an essential part of the type's contract, and therefore, if the base closed type is public, then all its immediate descendants should also be public or internal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm supportive of the language change. Absent that, I think we should continue to like not consider the accessibility of the derived types. Like, but yeah,
Well,
I think
mean,
adding any extra logic based on that is
we did a security review last week, and it was pointed out over there that the serializer could end up invoking internal constructors, even though it is handling a payload for a public type in that situation. So even if the language semantics don't change, we might be incentivized to not allow this particular pattern in the serialization level and instead, throw out a diagnostic.
But the problem is, like, you could call the internal constructor today if I pass it as a JSON derived type, right? The question is just like, how explicit do we require you to be? And I'm saying that if
Right.
you, especially now that you have this opt-in, if we have it behave this way from the beginning, where it's like, hey, you specify a type, you're getting everything in its hierarchy, regardless of the accessibility, that's fine. Like, you opted into it.
Yeah.
And then because like JSON does deserialize private internal types all the time and serializes it. So I don't think we should get in your way there. Now, if the language wants to avoid these kind of issues by saying, stay homogeneous, I think I support that. But I don't think system text JSON should be doing anything.
Okay.
Well, I mean, doesn't system text JSON depend on attributes to determine if a private field is serialized or
It's not
not?
about fields. It's not about fields. It's about the types. The fields act the way fields do. Private fields still won't get serialized.
It's just about this guy.
So I think on the subject of naming, this property, I would probably. So I think that something called something along the lines of enable polymorphism for closed types might be sufficient, because that alone might let users infer that derived types are inferred.
That one's weird because just looking at the name of it, it makes it sound like closed types will fail, and what you're doing is making them not fail, when it's not about, like, your proposal doesn't have infer or automatic or polymorphism anywhere in there. It's just like enable closed type. It's like, yes, I want types to serialize even if I put the word closed on them, but that's not what it means.
Wait, were you suggesting enable closed types, Eric, or were you suggesting one of the other ones?
No. If I said that was an error. I was saying enable polymorphism for closed types, or something along these lines.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I
similar to the
didn't
last one.
remove.
Yeah.
I didn't
Enable
get the
closed
word
type
polymorphism out of your. It didn't. At least it didn't
I
latch
heard
in my
it.
brain. So,
Yeah,
I understood the
that's fine.
proposal
I think he
was
said
for it, but
Yeah.
So enable closed type polymorphism.
yeah, sure that
Yeah, I'm fine
3
with
letters
that.
shorter.
The only thing is, like, closed type polymorphism can still exist without enabling closed type polymorphism if you're explicit about it. That's why I kind of like infer over enable.
Yeah, that's.
Um,
And then if we don't like automatic spelled out, here I'll give a.
wait, you would accept auto?
I'm pretty sure we've used auto as names of things before. Auto.
But then what if people think you're talking about an automobile? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, because we have, yeah, like interrupt services layout kind auto, interrupt services char set auto, Marshall pointer to string auto. Stuff in WinForms, stuff in ASP.NET 1.
It's definitely stuff in ASP.NET. Not a ton, but yeah.
Yeah, so like web UI script mode auto. So we've definitely used auto as a word for automatic before.
I also think it's like a CSS thing some cases, right? Like margin auto. But anyway, that might be some of it, but still.
The auto to me also reads like it could be the other direction of you're going to automatically close polymorphic types somehow, whatever that would mean.
You're reading it not as auto polymorphism for closed types, but auto closed for polymorphic types. Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, do you dislike infer closed type polymorphism?
I like the use of the word infer in general. It makes you sound sophisticated.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Does anyone object to infer closed type polymorphism?
We should call it implied closed type polymorphism. No, I'm just kidding.
One minor point of feedback is that, given that we do know that other closed things are in the language's pipeline, maybe we should explicitly call this closed class polymorphism, because closed enums are also closed types, but they wouldn't require inference.
But their polymorphic state is they're only one type, so saying that you infer their polymorphism is
using this property.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I yield.
If we did closed interfaces, would we want to control behavior related to that using this property?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we'd want this to also catch interfaces.
Yeah, and since it wouldn't do anything bad for enums, it would just ignore it.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless there's a model of closed types that relates to polymorphism that this would not cover, I think that the name is fine. Because enums, it's don't allow unnamed values. All right, sounds like infer closed type polymorphism is the name. What's the other type I need to update?
JSON source generation options attribute.
Jason, sounds like something I named. No one laughs at my jokes.
We do, we just muted.
Fair enough. Where does that type live?
Could be the same namespace, but
Well, is it in the child namespace and this thing
serialization.
doesn't show child
It's under
namespaces?
serialization.
Fair enough. If I find myself with this thing called free time, maybe I'll make the tree over there show child namespaces so I don't get confused. Jason, who's it? What's it?
Source generation options attribute, right below
there we
that
go.
one. Yep.
All right. Are we happy enough?
Okay.
I've stopped screaming. So. I think we're happy with that. Thank you, Eric. And can you remind me how you actually want your name to be pronounced, or do you care?
I don't.
Okay. I'll try to keep that in mind.
You can amuse me by pronouncing it in a different way every time.
I don't know. I can only think of so many ways to pronounce EI, but I'll try.
I mean, you can vary the R spelling, the K.
Eirik.
You do Eirik, Eric.
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 That sounds more or too much like a British insult. All right. But all right. Indent off by 1 on line 5. Where was line 5? Oh, that one. There we go. All right. Cool. And now.
Thank you.
I was within like 2 minutes of my. It's either 5 minutes or an hour prediction before the meeting. So thank you, Eric and Eirik at the same time. And now, Adam, we have your 3 proposals. Do you want to start with create suspended?
Yes, I do.
All right. Runtime 904.127.
Yes. So various operating systems allows us to start a process suspended. And this allows the users to, for example, attach a debugger, start a profiling session, and filter the trace just to given process, or maybe run some extra setup logic where we can just use process ID to complete it. And over the years, we didn't provide a built-in way to do that. The customers have been asking for this. And so here it is, an API that allows the customers to start a process as suspended. I'm trying to follow the pattern established by start detached. So it's not create suspended, it's start suspended. And of course, once we start a process suspended, we need an ability to resume it. But now with the introduction of safe process handle, we can start a process and get a process or safe process handle. So this is why I would like to expose resume on safe process handle, so anybody using either the handle or the process can resume it. If you scroll down a bit, you can see an API usage where on Unix we can use get priority to get priority of given process and set priority to set it when we have the ID. So we start process suspended, we configure the priority, and then we run it. This is the simplest sample I was able to come up with. When it comes to naming, the resume method already got approved for safe process handle once, but as you know, we have went back and forth about the option back. Some of the APIs got decommissioned. Anyway, the alternative design would be to not introduce resume, but extend the safe process handle.signal method, which on Unix can be used to send sig.cont signal to a suspended process to also just work on Windows. So in such case, we would have only a single property. However, it would be less obvious. But this is the thing I wanted to consider. So that's more or less it.
But your alternative design is, this doesn't replace the whole design, this just replaces the resume method.
Yes, exactly.
So resume was approved, but then kind of unapproved as part of the moving the options or consolidating the options.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess maybe this is obvious and maybe we don't need it, but there's no equivalent suspend API when the process is already running. Is that the case?
Could you repeat the question? Because I'm not
Sorry,
sure
is it true? Is it true that the only way to get the process into a suspended state using the .NET APIs would be to start suspended, or is there like a process started, or is there another way to suspend it?
Okay, so the question would be: is it possible to suspend a process that has been already running?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is possible.
Via a signal, basically.
Yes, I don't remember which exactly on Unix. On Windows, there is definitely a syscall.
Okay.
Yeah, however,
but that's not part of this proposal, and it's not something we've already shipped.
Yes, what's important in this case is that some of the users want to be able to run no logic before they suspend the process. So right. This is the goal. For example, let's say that you work on runtime and there is some tricky startup bug. So you would like to start the process suspended, attach a debugger, and then resume it. So you can debug entire, startup process.
Yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, I was just curious if there was already a suspend API somewhere. But I could see why you'd want this first, or this is more important than something that you could call on an arbitrary process instance. It's definitely not a replacement. I see why you need this separately.
And then I assume you're putting resume on the handle instead of on process, because all processes have handles, but if you call save process handle start, you don't have a process, and so you want to make that easy.
Exactly.
And if people complain, we could promote it to processes accelerator.
Yes, we can promote it. However, I'm not sure whether it's so popular. It had 11 upvotes.
Sure. Just
But-
thinking through of, are we putting ourselves in a corner in any way, and I don't think we are. So. Yeah. So I agree our verb that is involved in the things is start. So saying start suspended sounds fine. It matches start detached. So this looks good to me. I think I just saw Stefan give the thumbs up as I checked to see if chat had comments.
Yep.
All right. Dissent. All right. Look, Adam, a process thing that got approved easily.
Few more releases and around .NET 20 I will be good at this.
It's the luck of the draw. There's so many different factors into what makes review take time.
All right, so Chad asks, is save process handle only for Windows because of the Win32 namespace? No, that's because when we built .NET Framework, we were short-sighted, and we put all of the safe handles in Microsoft Win32, and save process handle is just old enough that it predates us being cross-platform. So,
and to add to that, this is the exact reason why we throw Win32 exception on Unix.
and yes, I'll change it to a partial to show that we're amending types here, not creating them. Whoop. All right. Do I call it now while you got the process thing through smoothly, or should we continue?
Let's continue.
All right. One-liner for running process with standard handles redirected to the null device. Runtime 128453.
Yes. So let me give you some historical background. Recently, we have introduced two convenience methods. One is process.run, another is process.run and capture text. And the first one, for run, the process is inheriting the parent standard handles. It's typically console, it could be pipe, whatever. For the other one, we prepare pipes, we redirect the output to pipes, we capture the output. However, when I started observing people update to .NET 11 and use the new APIs, I realized how popular it is to ask process to redirect output and error just for the sake of not reading it and not displaying it in the console. So with the new APIs, and this is risky because, for example, ASP.NET has recently run into a deadlock because the code was redirecting output and error, but not really reading it. So it was just for the sake of discarding it. And with the recently introduced APIs, we now can call file.open null handle and redirect input, output, and error to null handle, which will literally discard whatever we write to it. It's like a black hole. However, this pattern is so common across various .NET code bases is that I was thinking whether we could introduce a simpler way of doing this. In the main proposal, I was thinking about introducing run and discard output methods. That would be just redirecting input, output, and error to null and running the process, waiting for it to exit, and reporting the exit status. What I don't like about this approach is that we are introducing another 4 methods to process. So the alternative to that design, and of course we also have to choose a name, which is always tricky for me. The alternative design would be to extend run with an optional Boolean flag that would just let us know that we need to discard the output. I was having a conversation with LLM and it suggested the name silent. So it would be extending the existing process.run method with a new Boolean parameter. And I think this would be my preferred solution because just fewer APIs to add and to maintain, etc. Yeah. So are there any questions?
Once it's a parameter next to process start info, so looking at the alternative first, I guess, it makes me wonder why it's not a property on process start info. Like I can understand the parameter on the one that just takes a file name and arguments, and saying silent is a super common need, and we're just going to do it here and be done. But it feels like for process start info, like that is the options bag that we already have. So why wouldn't it gain this option?
That's a very good question.
Because presumably process start info has the stream or handle connections already. So you're still going to have to deal with the problem of if you give an explicit stream and say silent is true. So, which you'll have even with the method version. You call that an invalid configuration state. But I feel like that for this first one, we would put it on process start info instead of amending the signature.
Yeah, but I was wondering whether we could then only extend the 2 overloads that accept the path and arguments. I mean the run and run async that accept file name and arguments. Would then it make more sense? Because then, as you said, if you want to redirect to null using process start info, you can just open the null device and configure the handle via the existing process start info properties, like I have shown in the background part. Yeah, here.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, what you've proposed here, we can't do. We can't remove methods. We have to strip off their defaults, mark it editor browsable never, and then just add a new overload. So it's not. There's no. There is a minus involved in that we remove all the defaults, but it is less straightforward than shown here.
But if those methods were introduced in a preview version and we are still in preview mode.
Oh, then yeah.
Okay.
If run of file name and optional arguments and timeout has not had a RC or better release, then yeah, you could decide to make the source breaking change. Actually, that was not a source breaking change. That's a runtime breaking change.
Yeah, so they were released as part of .NET 11 Preview 4. And I would definitely make it.
Fair enough.
For Preview 7, maybe for Preview 6.
In which case, yes. So this would be, it would be this if we do it. Or okay. I guess you can do this because of the preview status.
Yeah, because and getting back to your proposal of moving it to process start info, I think it would be convenient to have one property to set it. But on the other hand, we have so many properties in process start info that I'm kind of always hesitant to add more. And also in the past, I have said no to people who asked for adding similar properties to process start info. So I wouldn't feel good about this. For example, a property that says redirect standard input, output, and error.
I feel like you've been quiet today, Tanner. Do you have thoughts between the top and bottom bottom A and bottom B?
Not particularly. The process APIs are complex, and I don't really see any way where we're going to get it super simple without dedicated overloads. And process start info is going to just stay complex. So if we've got properties, I think we should just continue adding it to that. And then if we need dedicated overloads for simpler scenarios, expose those dedicated overloads. But don't try and introduce a new way to separate out process start info from other options.
So I think that's you saying you dislike the highlighted overload.
Yes.
Because of the same thing I pointed out of like you've got the options bag and then an option sitting next to it. So
yeah, and if we had something where a common scenario is you want silent without the rest of the process options, then that might be worth a dedicated overload. But I don't see the point of having an overload that is process start info and then a bunch of other options that aren't part of the start info.
Here. No, I think that makes sense. I prefer the proposal run discard output async over the alternative design, but I think adding a silent property of some sort to process start info is probably fine. Kind of want to see what that code looks like, but it's probably fine.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if
Go ahead, Pranav.
I feel like if we're even considering adding a parameter, then it seems like something that could live on process start info. Like there is justification to say it's important enough that we can put it on process start info. People would not be too like confused by it.
And yeah, but just thinking out loud now. So if we extend process start info with a new property, then invoking this won't be one-liner, because, for example, we then won't be able to use it for the overload that takes just the file name and the arguments.
No, we can talk about that one independently.
Okay.
I think we're all just saying we don't like this first pair.
Okay.
That's true.
If
So
so the new named methods we could discuss, and down here it could be we put it on process start info, and then if we think that this is an important overload, we add the overload of the accelerator from file name and arguments. But I think we're all, by which I mean all other than Adam, in agreement that we even if we do add the, I'll just say bool silent to file name and arguments, that we don't want to do that same treatment for process start info. We would rather move it into process start info for the first scenario.
So I absolutely agree that we shouldn't have an option next to an option back in the same method. Once you have said it, it became obvious to me, but when I was proposing it, it wasn't.
Fair enough.
So.
Right, and so then we get, okay, we just want to make it easy for the just go run this by name case, and then we say that for process start info, it's already solved with this, or we can say that this is we made it possible previously, but possible and easy aren't the same thing, so we want to make it easy. I will say the negative of putting an extra property on process start info is that you now have to throw an exception if somebody has set standard output handle and to I guess something other than the null handle, and
There's
they've
no way to ever normalize it though, right? Like you could have already.
yeah, it was just
messed
you'd
it
have
up.
the like I explicitly set these properties, and I said discard the output, and it's like which one did you want
You
to
could
win?
do that. You could do that with any of these proposals though, whether or not you put the property on start info. Like any of them that take start info
Right.
and silent separately, it's the same problem.
Right, but if we're only going with the alternate approach and all that we do is edit the file name based methods,
I see.
then we don't have that problem.
So you're saying you would make it so the only way to do it via start info would be via the null handles. And then if you want the convenience thing, you could use the convenience methods with the silent.
I'm just pointing out that if
parameter.
we want the one-liner discard output an error and whatever we want to call it, that we've introduced an error state, and well, okay, we've introduced an additional error state into process start info. So
Right.
it
That's fair though.
it's just the trade-off that like that's not me arguing no, it's just me pointing out it's not. It makes one thing easy by making another thing hard, but it makes our code hard to make other people's code easy, which is usually a good trade-off. I'm just pointing out it's not free.
Yeah, I thought every proposal had, a way to mismatch the parameters here, but I suppose if we did not add any property to start info, and we just add the two overloads that take process name and arguments and silent, then there's nothing to conflate, which honestly doesn't seem that bad. Because if you're using process start info, you're doing like the longer thing, at which point you can pass null handles. But I'm not sure how I feel. I don't think it's that bad adding the property either.
My personal preference would be to do what Stefan just said and not add the property, because I think, to your point, Jeremy, it's very valid. Like I have been recently extending process to support the new properties, and now my exception messages are like, you cannot mix this with that and with that and with that. And yeah, so I like the idea that if you want to use process start info, you have to configure everything explicitly. But if you want to have one liner and you're most likely just passing file name and arguments, then you can also pass the Boolean parameter to run.
Yeah, I'm fine proving it like that.
And if you change your mind, you always have the option to add it there if you really want it.
Exactly. See, this was a good API proposal tactic. You proposed a bunch of big APIs, and what you really wanted were these two methods. Then it seems like we get to feel like we did something. You get your API approved. All right, anyway.
All right. I feel like people voiced dissent on the word silent. So do we have suggested replacements?
Discard output.
Dissent. Oh, discard output's fine.
So
I don't mind silent.
yeah, I think if it's discard output, we need to put an S on the end, and then the plural is because it's both standard out and standard error. But it just discard output, that is ambiguous as to whether or not standard error is being eaten.
One thing to consider is that we are also redirecting standard input to null. So if the process tries to read something, it says 0 bytes are available. End of file has been reached.
Interesting. Would it be better to give it like a never-ending input stream? Probably not.
It wouldn't be performant.
Okay. It would
I'm
probably be worse. Like most tools that aren't expecting standard in
Well, yeah,
wouldn't read from it
because
anyway.
in these cases, there's no place to attach an input stream, so I would assume that this already gives them the null device for standard in, or at least a closed pipe.
Right. No, I mean that's what the sample code that everyone does, right? Where they pass null to everything. It would end immediately. I kind of like silent just because I think it's one of those, like it's a bool. It's like exactly the kind of parameter that people are going to like spell out at the call site. I don't think anyone's going to be that confused about what silent does. It's shorter, it's clean.
It
Yeah,
disables console beep. You know. Just
does Windows even support that anymore?
I don't know.
Well, it does disable console beep, right?
I think
Doesn't that
Unix
isn't
does,
that
but-
like one of those ANSI characters
Yeah,
that
it's-
goes to like I forget. Yeah.
I want to say they made it be Control B because it's called the bell character. So,
Yeah. So it does disable that, I think. But anyway,
Amazing.
something could, of course, just like use ALSA or some audio API
yeah, like
would prevent that.
other suggestions that have come in is quiet instead of silent because of things that use -q to give me less output. But I feel that this is actually silent is better than quiet in this case because quiet still usually reports an error and silent is no. So you shall make no noise. So yeah, I think silent's fine. Discard outputs, the plural is fine.
Yeah, I think they're both fine with a slight preference towards silent, but not a huge one.
I feel weird saying this, which is a joke. I think I agree with Stefan. Yeah. You people with mute buttons. You make me sad.
Time to buy a lottery ticket or something, right? No.
All right. So I guess does anyone object to silent?
People who do, they are silent.
Yeah. All right.
And then the default behavior just redirects it to the parent's standard in, standard out. Is that how that works? Or opens a console window? Or
Yes, we open the standard input output and error of the parent process.
all right, yeah, that makes sense.
And
of
we
course,
do
not
that
that we could
mostly
change
for
the
historical
default anyway.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And out of curiosity, not those languages who were designed more recently, some of them redirect to null by default, because then you don't deal with certain kinds of problems. Like
What languages
process
have
outleaving.
silent by default? Oh, sorry.
If I remember correctly, Golang redirects to null by default.
That makes sense. Golang does change like OS defaults and things that like the C standard lib would do with socket as well. Namely, they disable negling by default, which is probably smart as well for similar reasons. They're fine to change historical defaults if they think it's better.
Okay. And as there was debate, I did remember correctly that it's called bell, but it looks like it's Control G, since Control is subtract 64. That's why Control D is end of transmission. All right, now we know. But yes, it is \A for annoy people with the console beep. Yep, totally back from that. All right, adding bool silent. before the time span or before the timeout / cancellation token. Defaults to false, and we'll amend process start info later if somebody really wants to. Though, as was pointed out in the chat, this is an easy a thing that actually would be, well, I guess I'll just lift it and say we can talk about it right now. Someone proposed for process start info, instead of adding a property that sets it in an invalid state, adding a method called, like, you know, go silent mode. I actually lost where the method name was. That would just set the handles or the output handles to the, not to null, but to the null output handle. So that would be sort of a one-liner, but wouldn't add the invalid state because it's a method, so it's just going to change the properties. That sounds like a reasonable thing to me, but we can decide to do that later when someone asks for it. All right, sounds like we're leaving that for later.
We do.
All right, approved and breaking.
Breaking the preview. Yeah, I see. Preview to preview. No, I see.
Yeah, because anybody who called this one, if they don't recompile rolling forward, though we may have said that we don't consider it a breaking change if it's only preview to preview. So you might just be able to just yoink out the tag. But if someone previously called the new run and they don't recompile but run on the newer runtime, including RTM, they'll get a missing method exception. You have to recompile to get the fix. So, but we may just say preview to preview rolling upgrade isn't supported. I don't remember. That's not my department. All right. Process constructor from safe process handle.
Okay. So
71595.
process start info exposes a bunch of possibilities to customize process startup. However, we won't be able to provide all possible ways to customize it because Windows adds new flags, Mac OS has its own things, Linux does as well. So some of the users needs to spawn the process on their own and using pinvoke and then use process. We have recently introduced safe process handle, so they can now wait for the process to exit, kill it, signal it. However, some customers reported that they still need to use process because they would like to use all of the methods that we provide for capturing output and error. So what they have is a process that they started on their own. They have the handle, but now they want the process. In my original proposal, I wanted to introduce a new process constructor that would accept safe process handle, process start info, and optionally handle to standard input, output, and error. But as Jan Kotas has pointed, in my prototype, this leaves some space for the user to run into bugs. Namely, on Windows, if you want to start a process, the standard input, output, and error needs to be inheritable. And if you start any other process in parallel at the same time, that process will simply inherit those handles as well. And then you can run into some really nasty edge case bugs that, for example, a pipe is not reporting end of file because some other process inherited it and then keeps it opened. So the alternative to providing a process constructor that takes those parameters would be to provide the users with all of the data pre-configured by us, where we take all of the necessary logs, we concatenate the arguments, we escape them, we pin the memory, and then we just give the users the arguments and invoke a callback that they have provided, and they give us back a safe process handle. So if you scroll down a bit, you can see that this alternative design shows two structs. One is Windows specific, and another is Unix specific. We need two different ones because Windows is using Unicode everywhere and Unix is using UTF-8. So the first one accepts pointer to character and another pointer to byte or to a pointer of bytes. So the alternative proposal is more complex to get right on our side in .NET Runtime. However, the advantage is that it's way less likely for the customers to run into some niche edge case bugs because they don't consider certain edge case scenarios that we do know that exist. And here I wanted to say that my goal for today is to discuss this idea. I want to hear your feedback. I'm not saying that it's 100% ready yet. Personally, I'm not 100% convinced yet, but I would like to hear your feedback and see how you like it.
So we're pretty convinced the first design is too fragile, because it sounds like, because I was wondering, like, how does it even work if you don't, like, you're requiring that the person, I guess, is accurate with the handles that they pass in. But then you're saying there's certain things with the lock that even if they try to do everything right, it might not be possible. Yeah, I guess, like, do you have like a specific example for something that you can't do with normal process start info and just calling start without the func?
So one of the scenarios that was mentioned under the blog post that we have recently published was a customer that is developing a system that runs arbitrary source code implemented by students and ranks them, and they need to run it as non-elevated user, restrict RAM and CPU power, but they need to use a syscall different than create process, and they need to use Windows jobs, which we don't expose as well. But they really care about capturing output and error, and they really like the new methods that we have recently introduced that allow you to avoid deadlocks when doing that.
Yeah, I know that there's like certain things with Windows jobs if you want to like tie parent and child lifetime together too, that like I'm sure, I know you've been talking about, maybe we expose that better now. That makes sense.
Yeah, because Windows provides at least 4 different syscalls to start the process, and we use only 2 of them.
I see. It is a convoluted API, the func one. Part of me was wondering, like, oh man, is there like, could we just leverage the suspend on start? But it sounds like no.
But this is a very good question. In general, start suspended is good extensibility point because you can configure plenty of things, but you are allowed to configure only things that you can configure after startup and that work when you just know the process ID and you have the right to do it. Because some, for example, on Linux, some of the things you can do only from the process itself.
So what would you even be doing in the callback? Because your callback isn't giving you the process that's being built.
Sure it is, via the handle.
Sorry, it's not giving you the process system.diagnostics.process object that is being built. So what are you?
If you want, we can take a look at the prototype that I have implemented.
I'm just trying to
Maybe it
understand
will
the
be-
flow. So you set some stuff in process start info. You call start. It
Yeah, so I can
calls
give you
create.
an example of how it would work on Windows.
Okay.
So on Windows, let's say somebody wants to redirect standard output and error. They configure it via process start info. They provide the name, arguments, but they want to use a different syscall, for example, that uses a token to start the process as given user. So we acquire the global log to make sure no other processes are started. We create the pipes. We configure them to be inheritable. We do escape arguments, everything, etc. We get the environment variables. We also add ref for the input, output, and error handles, so they are not closed in the meantime. So we provide all of that to the callback, and now the callback is starting the process, configuring, using the provided arguments, environment variable, and
Because
handles, and it gives us back the safe process handle, and
Yeah.
then we use the constructor that I have shown at the top, which is private.
right, because it's not it's func, so it's these are the arguments in. Now you turn them into the process handle by calling create process W yourself, or whatever way you feel like creating a process. Okay. That makes it says func, but my brain loaded it as action. It's like so you created the process, and now you're telling them here's the peb and here's the process handle. Like this makes no sense. But this isn't the peb. This is the normalized. This is the stuff that I would have passed to create process, but you've told me that you want to be involved.
Exactly.
In particular, the char star of arguments and environment variables. Okay. Because the problem that I have with this top one is that you can lie or you can be wrong, and then so that it's the error states of if your process start info says you started calc, but the process handle is for I don't know CMD, like this is not a process object that you would get if you enumerated processes at all. And
you could
also,
still
what's it?
lie with the alternative API, right?
What's it mean to?
You could do exactly what you said.
That is true. You could ignore the thing to run, and you could launch calc when the process start info says you should launch CMD. But then it was also like, what does it mean to pass a handle here? The process has already started. The handles are bound.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, like but I figured it, like the start info, you're just expected to pass in the handles that were already bound. But maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I think with the callback, users are less likely to run into issues. For example, when you create the pipe and you start the process, you need to give it one end, but you need to use the other end for reading, right? So people may not, it's obvious when you know it, but people may just, misconfigure that. So.
Right, and like with the other API, like unless you started suspended, which I suppose you could because you now have a resume API, like it also kind of risks like, I guess if you already had everything attached, fine. I mean, you started the process, so you don't have to miss anything. But if you wanted to like read the output or whatever via the process object, you wouldn't get it early enough unless you started suspended. Whereas with this, I guess it's the same problem, kind of. Well, it's helping set up the, yeah, I don't know. I guess you set that up in start info, usually not the process object itself, so it should be fine. But this would assist with that, I suppose, with the func API. So Adam, I assume like the first API is not something you would really want to do at this point. You would rather do.
Yeah, it was
the
my
fucking guy.
initial idea, but then Jan convinced me that it's too fragile. It's very
Mhm.
from my perspective, it's simple, and but it's fragile, and if people, for example, don't take this global lock on Windows, they can really run into some nasty edge case bugs.
That makes sense.
One
Like, I
could
don't
argue
think
that
anyone would know to do that.
yeah, one could argue that, hey, you're the super user who wants to do some custom thing for starting process, so you should know. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like that, it's too dangerous. And if this funk gives you the same power, it sounds like you need without the foot gun of failing to take the lock and so forth, or the inheritance table. I think the funk is better. So it's basically between that and not approving anything at all.
yes.
So, chat has pointed out the way that the alternative is currently being proposed precludes the ability to write it with lambdas. Precludes it to write it with the normal lambda, because you have to type your input argument to know which overload you're calling. It's not the end of the world, but it is still
That's a good point.
a little surprising. I wish there was a way to figure out, or I wish there was a way that we could get these two things into one structure. Like methods on the process start
At some
info.
point of time, I had that. If you scroll down to the bottom of the issue, and a little bit up. Yeah, here you have it. Like at the beginning, I had like void star arguments and void star environment variables, because it would be a pointer to Unicode on Windows and to UTF-8 on Unix.
The problem is like you need different code right inside the callback for Windows and Linux, naturally, probably. Part of me wonders like I don't mind the API. I do mind it being called process.start. And if we moved it somewhere else, could you have like start Windows native, start Unix native? Like, I don't know.
Just thinking out loud now, it could be a method on the option back itself. Because process start info also does have start method, right? Sorry. Sorry, it couldn't, because we create the option. We create those arguments and we provide them to the callback.
I mean, somewhere you do need to have you need to know what OS you're running on, because you're either calling create process W or fork and exec.
Or both, depending on what platform you're running on, or either rather.
Yeah, unless it would be a static method. So you could do Windows process start arguments.start, where you would provide us with process start info and the callback, and you would get process back.
So this would have like the supported OS platform attributes on it and all that.
Yeah.
on the start API itself or wherever we move it. But yeah, that makes sense.
Is the
It
type
is
of
weird
point-
to have overloads with different OS supports.
Miha?
I'm just thinking if it's that bad that the type of the pointer would be lost, because I imagine that the use case is that you really only have these members here just to forward to the pinbook, right? You're not expected to set this or really interpret what it's pointing to, because you can just read the process start info, right?
Well, you are forced to interpret it because you have to call native process starting.
I mean, you're not like expected to like go read and like see what the string behind it is or something, right? It's you really just take it and paste it to the pinbook.
Yeah,
Column.
that's correct.
I do think the func, it should probably be different methods for Windows and Unix here, and different callbacks. Like I don't see why calling the same callback on both Windows and Linux is good here.
Yeah, I mean, so naming them, let's just say they stay on process for the naming purposes. Process.start Windows native, process.start Unix native, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be better. And then at that point, there is like really no reason to try to combine the start arguments. And I don't think you should.
And keeping them
Jeremy,
typed makes the thing easy. Go ahead.
Could you please refresh the page and go to the bottom? I have posted my idea, and maybe I'm struggling to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
question
see.
is, where are you getting these structs? Like, it would make sense if you had a constructor that takes process start info, and you're like, okay, I can turn process start info into things, but where is it getting the memory for the arguments? Like, because these pointers need to be pointing somewhere. I guess really it's the
Well,
problem for the Unix
the callback
one,
will
is you
be
have to
on the
transpose.
stack, right? So I
Right.
mean, I don't know. It's only you only get an instance of it in your
right,
callback.
because it's static.
Yeah,
Does it
it's a
make
little
sense?
weird, but it's better than process.
I mean,
in my
it
opinion.
does hide it.
Does it make sense for any of these to be settable members? Like, wouldn't you really only ever want to read them?
Good point.
Yeah, they could all be private sets or internal sets.
Yeah, the reason why I made them public was that in the past, when I was proposing similar APIs, people were complaining that they won't be able to unit test it. A kind of mock.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't care that much either way, to be honest. But yeah,
Yeah, and the only, I guess, the only scenario for settable would be if you were doing unit testing, or if you're doing composition and it's, well, I totally always want to shove an extra environment variable on there, so I need to go copy the environment variables into a bigger chunk of memory, set my own, add this environment variable, and then call whatever function was given to me. So there is a composition element of why you would want to change it, but
For the mocking part, most of .NET is not mockable, and I feel like I don't care about anyone who wants to mock. If it's something that we care about, then it's going to be a very specific scenario where we're going to want to explicitly design the interface for the mocking purpose, like we did with Time Provider. And otherwise, it's not something we should care about at all for most types we're designing.
yeah,
I would lean towards removing the sets. You could add them later in theory.
yeah, and the mockability here doesn't super, like, you're gonna pass the things you were given into the places that you need to pass them. You do your testing by varying your process start info input, but so this is still testable. You just
Yeah.
can't directly test your callback. You have to test it through the indirection of calling start.
Which would mean that it ends up requiring that global Windows lock and stuff, which maybe you don't want to, but yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, but if all you're really doing is doing this so that you can create process W and pass a flag that we don't support, then how
you can
much
always
testing do you
refactor
really
your
need?
callback.
So
Yeah, to be testable. So you can just copy out the arguments to your own testable thing.
true.
There's always options.
True.
And I don't mind if we make it read-only.
All right, and it's a ref struct so that people can't keep it in the func. It's run it in the func, and then the char star is dead. So
You might want a T-state if people want to pass in extra arguments to their func.
that's true. We could also just overload that for the people who don't.
I have a hard drop today, sadly. I would be fine with approving what Adam has here, but I understand not wanting to rush it. And let's just start a discussion.
Yeah, I think that this is like 85% of the way there. Somebody has the question, why, or do we really need the process start info both as an input to start and a property on the process start arguments? Which, I think that might.
Because we want to expose some information like working directory, for example.
Yeah, but I think that just kind of goes back to Pranav's. Maybe now you just make a value tuple of your process start info and whatever other state you wanted to pass in for state. Like it's things.
Just like
it's
add
things
a
to think
state
about.
parameter.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
overload
that's
it with
more
the
generic.
state
Yeah.
parameter.
Yeah.
And then if you want the process start info in your callback, then take it. Pass it to yourself.
Part of me is like, you're starting a process, just create a closure. No, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
just allocate capture.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
But yeah, a thing that I would sort of hope we could do here is, I wonder if there's a better namespace we could put these in instead of directly in system diagnostics. I don't know if there's a good child namespace. I don't know, maybe if they would go better in interop services or something. I'm fine. Like them returning a process object seems cool. Interacting with process handle seems cool. It's just like, does this really need to live in system diagnostics, or can we like hide it somewhere? That and things about figuring out the user state. Like, do we make them do a closure? Do we take a T state? Do we yoink off the process start info because they can move it to the closure or their state argument? Because I feel like it's important that we do here's the translations we did, because you can't get them any other way. But anything else that was data you had access to, you should just give to yourself. So. And then there was a question from chat, what about making the arguments and environment variables a typed safe buffer? That's a thing to think about. Again, I think we're agreed that we're not solving this today because I also have to leave pretty soon. So. All right. That's those messages discarded. But yeah, I think this is a good start. I like this path as not trying to hide too much and not introducing error states. Just it needs a little bit more polish. Which if we had another half an hour, I think we could do, but we don't today. Then you should go to bed or something since you're in Europe.
Yeah. I must say that my son is very happy because anytime I'm proposing API designs, he's allowed to watch cartoons for all this time. So today, instead of 20 minutes, he'll be watching this for 2 hours. So.
C sharp. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Right. Must be Italian. C sharp. All right. So, Adam, I'm gonna mark this as needs work so that it shows up in the minutes because it only finds when labels change, and then I can go ahead and put it straight back to ready for review, unless you want to leave it offline and make some changes before next week. But like, if you think you'll have it ready next week, I'll just go ahead and mark it back as ready for review.
Please mark it, because I really want to be done with process. I mean, not in the wrong way, but I want to finish it.
Yeah, I mean, if me marking it needs work, but not marking it ready for review is just waiting for you to mark it ready for review after you make your edits. So it doesn't.
Okay, so I will do it myself then.
Either way, you'll bounce back in the queue with the time that you first marked it ready for review. So you'll jump back to the front because we're re-reviewing you.
Awesome.
I mean, after the blocking things that inevitably will come in. So, alrighty. Any final notes that people have? Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining us online. I know I felt like the serialization part was heated, but that may be just me. But definitely there was good input for all the proposals we had today, except for Adam's one that just sailed through, because everybody just sort of liked that one. So nice work, Adam. And with that, we'll see you, or we'll be back here next week at our same.net time on our same.net channel. And until then, au revoir.
Thank you, bye.
And no one asked about my hat.